I've just put together some charts very quickly. I think we'll all be interested and probably surprised at what the markets are telling us this morning. So give me 2 minutes and we will start. Thank you much. Hello, everyone. This is Joseph Trevisani from Worldwide Markets. I'd like to thank FX for putting on this webinar. I'm complimented that they asked me to do this morning in the wake of both the historic election in the United States. I'm sure you've all been aware of this, and historic in the sense that nobody has ever done what Mr. Trump accomplished. It has never happened before in the history of the United States. As a nation, going back to 1781 or 1783, whatever you'd like to judge it from, or 1776. The more astonishing thing is the market reaction. First of all, let's take a look at what the elections were showing us. This is from a site, an American site called Real Clear Markets, that was on that I think is one of the best political sites out there. This is what they were predicting right before the election if there were no toss-up states, as the polls were saying. And as you can see, they got almost everything correct, except, surprisingly, Wisconsin and Minnesota right here in the middle of the country, the old industrial heartland of the country, which is what's key, and Pennsylvania all voted for Donald Trump, giving Mr. Trump somewhere by the time it's finally counted, over 300 votes, electoral votes. Okay, now let's look at the market reaction, both during the, this is the most, let me find the best chart I can find it here. I apologize, it's going to be a slightly haphazard arrangement with the charts. I was here very late last night, and I did not get a chance to organize this as much as I would like, so I'm going to have to fish around a little bit for the charts. I have quite a few, some of them from last night. I just want to make sure I can find the right ones. They're not all labeled as efficiently as I would like, since they were some of the charts from last night. Okay, this is one of my favorites. This is the Dow E-mini. Sometime around 11:30, 12 o'clock. That is the definition of a panic reaction. What we must remember, and I wrote about this several times if you've seen my posts or my columns, is that the markets had priced in completely a Hillary Clinton victory. What we saw last night, and I said this last night as we were proceeding through this, At the worst point, I was down approximately 800 points in the E-mini. One, very little liquidity. Two, pure panic. But three, as everyone seemed to have forgotten in all the commentaries I was watching last night, the Dow had been up 440 some points in 3 days before. This is not an unexpected move. Let's take a look at it today. This is the most astonishing thing out there, I think. Where's my E-mini November 9th? This is a chart of the same contract today. Rather amazing. The main point I think that we can take so far, and I'm going to go through this with almost all of the markets that we're going to look at, them is focus mostly on Forex. Except for the yen crosses, the Aussie yen and the Kiwi yen, and also the Aussie and the Kiwi. I didn't put up a Kiwi, but I did put up an Aussie chart. Almost all of the markets have recovered to where they were. Take a look at this. This is maybe the most interesting chart there. I hope I brought it. Yes, I did. Here it is. This is the 10-year yield, the most commercially important of all the treasury yields. It, last night, as this was taking place, the 10-year yield had lost about 13 points. Now, that was simply a risk-off reaction. The entire reaction across all markets last night as the vote was coming in. Ms. Clinton, I believe, is giving her concession speech about now. So I'll have to watch that on video. Also, as we know, in all of these things, if anyone's interested, any questions, I have the chat up from FX Street. Do you have any questions? This is free form. I will give you my opinions and tell you what I think is happening here for the markets. And if you have any questions, comments, jokes, the usual, just put them up and I'll respond to them once I get there. I'll get to what I think about the USD in a minute. Just give me 1 sec. I'm going to focus on currencies here. This is a 10-year. Went down 13 points. It came back all of those 13 points and is now at 1.95. What is this telling you? I think a couple of things. One, Mr. Trump, now the President-elect Trump, has said that he would replace Janet Yellen. Mr. Trump does not take office, I believe, until January 20th. If the Fed's going to get in a rate increase, they need to do it pronto. So it seems to me that this, almost regardless of anything that happens in the stock market or anything else, the Fed's going to put in this rate increase in December. And I think that's what this is telling you more than anything else. Okay. Now let's take a look at some of the currencies and how they reacted last night. Where's my euro? As I said, you have to bear with me a little bit here. Did I not put up a euro? I must have put up a euro. Well, okay, well, anyway, let's look at this one. And this is emblematic of everything that we're seeing last night. This is Swiss franc, a classic risk-averse trade. From about 930, 980, 98.50 down to perhaps 95.50 and back. Trading until in the days before the election, what did we see? When it looked as if Mrs. Clinton was going to win, the dollar rebounded strongly. The initial response to the Trump victory, or the pending Trump victory last night, was dollar weakness, unusually so because normally when there's a risk-off trade, the dollar benefits. But what have we seen since then? We have seen flat-out recovery in everything. Okay, let me see what I can find here in my charts. It looks like one or two of my charts did not get through. That is unfortunate. But anyway, okay, this, okay, so this is the euro last night. Again, I apologize for being a little haphazard with the charts. That's a result of rushing the preparation for this. So this is the euro last night. It ended up at one point being more than 3 figures higher in the euro. Where is it now? Back to 110. The remarkable fact about this election is how unremarkable it has turned out to be. Okay, here we go. There does seem to be that some of my charts did not make it here. If everyone will bear with me, I'm just going to see if I can pull up some of the ones that seem to have vanished in the interim. So give me 1 second here. I'll see if I can get the charts up. I apologize for this delay. It's been kind of a hectic day, shall we say. Okay, here we go. Not that one. Not that one. Well, I'm a bit puzzled here. I hate to admit it, but it does not seem that some of the charts that I had sent over made it. So I'm going to have to figure out what to do here. Okay. I don't want to delay anyone any further, but I need some of the information here from the... Okay, well, let's work with this one. Okay, this one is good. So, application, share. Okay. This is the Dow. Actually, this is about this morning, where we were, 10:45, just before I came in. There are a number of strands involved in this particular election. From the market point of view, none of the analysis, the reaction of the markets, seemed to be based on any type of appreciation or analysis of what was actually or could be Donald Trump's economic plan. I think the market has done a swift appreciation and reversal on the reality of that. And the Dow is absolutely indicative of that reassessment. It's true in the currencies, and I think it's true in the equities. The one place it's not been true, and there has been a switch, has been in the credit markets. Now, what's some of the logic behind this? In other words, why did the markets respond this way? Why did the dollar plunge? Why did the E-mini, the futures on the Dow, ended up down 800 points at one point last night. Part of it, of course, is sheer surprise. The market simply got this completely and utterly wrong. It was my opinion, as I wrote a number of times, that you had to give Clinton the edge running into it simply because of the polls, but that the odds of Mr. Trump winning were considerably greater than the media appreciated. This is what I wrote for FX Street actually back in at the end of October, about 2 weeks ago. This has certainly turned out to be true. How did markets get this so wrong? We consider markets as the best arbiter of things for which we don't know the answer. Predictions, basically. The obvious analogy, of course, is Brexit, which I'll deal with in a minute, and perhaps the reasons for that. But to come back to the American election, how did the markets get this so wrong? And that, I think, is a matter of the very peculiar and unusual type of campaign that was conducted between the candidates. It was essentially policy free. There were no stories about Mrs. Clinton's economic policy, or very few. There were no stories about Donald Trump's economic policy, or very few, or anything else. The campaign was almost completely conducted ad hominem. From the Clinton side, Donald Trump is unfit to be president for all sorts of character flaws. From the Trump side, Hillary Clinton is unfit to be president because she is corrupt and a number of other character flaws. The campaign was conducted on that. And the markets, Dow, currencies, credit to some extent, bought into it. The almost entire media opinion was that Clinton would win the election, rather handily. Hillary Clinton had cultivated ties on Wall Street assiduously over the years. She made millions and millions and millions, as did Bill Clinton, the former president, in giving speeches to Wall Street and various other financial market types. The ties were tight. They were well paid. It was the opinion, the bet, of course, of the financial markets as represented by the people in the financial markets who made the decisions, that they were buying into a winner. They were buying influence. That shock is more responsible than anything else for the incredible gyrations that we've seen overnight. It is also responsible on circumspect analysis that a Trump White House, cooperating or not with, and just, you know, there's been, last night I was fielding comments and questions and concerns from friends of mine all over the world, because I've worked in a number of places around the world about this election. And one thing that I found astonishing is that the media representation of Donald Trump has been phenomenally one-sided. I'm not going to get into a discussion about it, but it was completely without reference to any particular possibility, any particular policy cast. And what have the markets suddenly realized? Whoa, this morning. A Donald Trump administration cooperating with a Republican's House and a Republican Senate is most likely to be what? Business friendly. Period. Whatever economic ideas have been put forth by the Trump campaign involve less regulation, tax cuts, and some kind of trade adjustment. Well, the first two are unambiguously pro-business. Mr. Trump has repeatedly spoken about the burden of the corporate tax structure in the United States, which is relatively high. Again, I'm not going to get into arguments about or discussions about what they actually pay as far as taxes go, all this. But as far as perception on policy goes, the Trump White House will most likely attempt to duplicate the success of a generation ago when Ronald Reagan took over the White House. The last even remotely populist candidate here in the United States. So the reversal in the fortunes of the markets is very well grounded if they bothered to think about it. So the question about what do I think about the dollar? I think the dollar has a very good chance of getting stronger here because these are going to be assumptions. We don't know the policy details. It's now November. So it's November. That's December, January. There's more than 2 months of transition. Donald Trump is, and this is something else. You know, I live in Manhattan, which, believe me, did not vote for Donald Trump, even though he's from New York. He's from Queens. This is the first president from New York State, which I can't find anywhere, since Franklin Roosevelt in 1932, and last election, 1944. It's a long time. New York being, I think, the third most populous state now, and I think the third greatest number of electoral votes. I think it's California, Texas, and New York State. Of all of the candidates, and I'm going to be writing up something today, and I'll put it up. I have to reassure some of my Manhattanite friends. I thought actually there's a very large installation artist. I don't know what country he's from, named Christo. And he wraps things in crepe paper and his installations, although that's pretty big. I was half joking. I told a friend of mine last night when I drove home at 2 o'clock in the morning over the George Washington Bridge from New Jersey where I work, and you get a glorious view of the Manhattan skyline coming down the west side on the Hudson River. So you can see the river immediately backed up by the enormous spires, many of them lit, of Manhattan. Sort of my view of the Magic Kingdom. I was joking with a friend of mine on the way home, and I said that I thought I was going to find Manhattan completely wrapped in black crepe. One of the things that will be discovered and is happening immediately, and you're looking at it in the chart, it's twofold. Two of the things. One, Donald Trump as a candidate, but then again, judged as his background, is a businessman. He was the least conservative of all of the original 16 or 17 Republican candidates in the primaries. His campaign had almost no interest in cultural values, the cultural value warfare that's been going on in American politics for a generation now. The Clinton campaign bet on that. They clearly lost. So the likely policies are going to be pragmatic, business-related solutions. If Mr. Trump has spoken of himself in any fashion, it is as a negotiator and a problem solver. So the idea that the risk-off trade is going to dominate for the next 2 or 3 months or the next 6 months is not one that I really buy. Let us take an example. Let us look at something that is a possibility, and it actually gives us some insight into this. Okay. This is the one area where there is, in my mind, questions about what we're going to see. You must say the mandarins in Beijing did not waste any time. It's funny, I was talking to a friend of mine here in the office who is from the mainland, from just north of Beijing. And I asked her what were the reaction of her friends back home. And she said they're all pleased. And I didn't have time to actually discuss with her some of the reasons. We are going to have, and I'll probably do this at my upcoming webinar on Monday, that we will go into this all in detail, and I'll have time to lay out some of the results more effectively rather than the kind of the short reaction we had this morning. But this is certainly one of the focuses. That's the Chinese yuan. And look where we are. Here is the, I think a 15-minute in the 6 month, this is the 6 month in the yuan. You can see, now this is a pattern here, of course. This pattern goes back almost 3 years as far as the devaluation of the yuan. But the Chinese wasted absolutely no time last night in resuming the devaluation after the brief hiatus in the yuan. And this is telling you, this is certainly one of the issues that will bear on markets in the next several months. It is probably the most questionable, meaning questionable in its effect. For the other markets, one, as I said, the Trump administration is most likely to be a business-friendly administration. It just doesn't make any sense for it not to be the case. It will downplay cultural disputes here in the United States because the Trump administration won't be particularly interested in them. It will be in favor of helping business. So think about this. Mr. Trump has said that he would like to replace Janet Yellen, and maybe he will. But business-friendly from this low a growth stage at 2% approximately for the past 7 years does not mean rapidly rising interest rates. I think that as we move into this transition and administration, we will find that the logic behind the Fed's fear about raising rates in a 2% environment will reassert itself because it's true. Until, if Donald Trump and the Republican Congress enact tax cuts, they enact regulation restraint, they rescind some of the regulations and executive orders promulgated by outgoing President Obama, they undertake some sort of either replacement or revision of the Healthcare Act known as Obamacare. All of these things will end up being business friendly. Businesses are what create jobs. As this takes place, my guess is it will dawn upon them that now is probably not the right time, as we're trying to get the economy moving at a stronger pace. Now is probably not the time to begin a rapid rate hike cycle. So although I think you'll get support for the dollar, it will not come from a Fed rapidly raising rates. That would be counter to what is likely as the economic program of the incoming administration. One of the main areas where I have question about how the logic plays out is right here. China's telling you what they think. They're telling you right here. This chart is telling you exactly what the economic planners and the political leaders in Beijing are thinking. Trump has campaigned, if not on a protectionist platform, certainly on a revision of the trade deals that have taken place, starting with NAFTA. There is an interesting argument, and I've made this for a long time, to be voiced about the idea of free trade. In the classical economic sense, as in more goods generated through specialization and traded, free trade is an almost unambiguous good. But in the human and political sense, that's not true. And since we are both social, human, and voting creatures, at least in the United States, the human costs need to be assessed as well. And that is certainly part of this election. And it isn't a negation of the ideas of free trade to say that all of the costs must be measured, not just the increase in the availability of cheaper goods. So that idea is in this chart. If nothing else, I expect that the rhetoric from the United States government, Mr. Trump is known to, I would think personally that this is an absolutely humbling experience, but I don't know. I've never run for office. As has been said many times, you have to be a little bit crazy and quite a bit of an egotist to even assume you can run for president. And for Mr. Trump, for whom everyone at every step, I mean, I've been reading through some of the commentary in the past couple of days from when Mr. Trump started running more than a year ago. And it was just uniformly, astonishingly wrong. Wrong in perception, wrong in assessment, wrong in judgment. I can't tell you how many comments I read, well, this will fold, from every single side. The assessment has been wrong. I can count the number of commentators, political and also economic, who had any perception of where this was coming from and where this might possibly be going. The analogy to Brexit, and the interesting thing about the two elections is really the closeness of the two cultures, the culture of the UK and the culture of the United States. We are, after all, in many ways, a derivative of the British political culture. Our system is different, but many of our outlooks are quite similar. The hold of traditional values across the country is in both countries vastly, vastly greater, more pronounced, and deeper than is appreciated from the financial, political, and media centers. In Britain, London; in the United States, New York, Washington, Los Angeles, and probably Silicon Valley. In the United States, that whole area in the middle of the country basically from, I used to say from the Hudson, it's probably now from the Delaware, which is the western border of New Jersey, part of the state, to the Sierra Nevada, the mountains on the eastern side of California, demarking the coastal area, the coastal plain from the Central Valleys. Here, known derisively as flyover country, because the people in New York fly to Los Angeles. I myself just flew to Portland and to San Diego and then back. And the people from Washington go back and forth to New York and Boston, and then they fly out to Los Angeles or Silicon Valley or the Northwest or San Diego. And they never stop and they never appreciate what's in between. Not a very successful political strategy, as we see. And so whatever else wants to say about Donald Trump, that there apparently are very few people who appreciated this. The most astonishing factor of this election is anyone could have seen this, but nobody did. And as soon as they were given a chance to vote, the people made their wish known. So the specific trade item that we're looking at is something that I am thinking about. But I do not think, in other words, I expect a great deal more of rhetoric out of the Trump administration, the transition team, about the unfairness of international trade agreements that the United States has solved and the necessity of taking U.S. jobs into consideration. That will be a difficult game to play. The Chinese are clearly taking no chances. But the reason that'll be a difficult game to play is the same logic that is likely to keep rates on the Fed's very, very slow upward path. The same type of logic is most likely to come about in the trade discussion as well. First of all, NAFTA is an agreement. It was signed 30 years ago. Its results have been devastating for the industrial Midwest. That's true. The internationalist arguments are strong. They have brought China into the world economic system in the most pronounced fashion. It's probably not true, as was thought by many economists and others and politicians before the First World War, that the increasing and evident and powerful commercial ties between the nations of the world from 1870 until 1914 would preclude a war. That is clearly not the case. Politics is not the domain of policy. Politics is the domain of the emotions almost always. And especially when the times are troubled, or as that non-real Chinese quote supposedly is, may you live in interesting times. Apparently it's not an old Chinese quote. No one could ever find it. In Chinese, it was quoted from a Western scholar in China, but apparently made it up. Anyway, it's a great quote. May you live in interesting times, meaning that may you live in revolutionary, troubled, the kind of times that are interesting for our descendants to study, but are most assuredly unsettling, at the very least, to live through. So that type of consideration on trade, much as the consideration, now, it's my view, and has been for some time, that one of the problems with economic growth in the United States is our low interest rates. Because what they do is they distort the most basic commodity of a capitalist economy, the cost of money. So if you're a businessman and you want to create jobs, you have to plan a couple of years out ahead. That's what you do. And for most businesses, the expenses run this way. The cost of employees, compensation. Second is interest, what you pay on your loan. Businesses, by and large, do not fund themselves out of retained capital. They fund themselves out of borrowed money, credit lines. If you can't judge what the cost is going to be for any project that you're planning 2 or 3 years out, then you hesitate. And this is part of the problem. And I think the Fed has realized this, why they're so desperate to raise rates. That, and sooner or later, we're going to have a recession. And what is the Fed going to do? So their logic is very strong as far as what they do. They put themselves in a box. It maybe was inevitable. It may be that this particular box has elements of tragedy to it, where good intentions produce dangerous results. That is the essence of tragedy. Character flaws drive the plot, even in good characters, in good men, in good women. Nobody's perfect. And the denouement of the plot is driven by those character flaws, sometimes hidden, often hidden. Same issues for the Fed. The desire of the Fed, the mandate of the Fed to make things better, basically, becomes entangled with the realities of a capitalist system. So you have some of the same problems here, which is why I don't think you're going to get some vast, rapid increase in rates, because that would drive the economy into recession. You have some of the same issues here with international trade. International trade does produce enormous benefits. So how does one temper the benefits with the desire to ameliorate some of the harms? And so though I think you're going to get rhetoric out of the Trump administration, and honestly, the Trump administration is at the moment rather formless. There aren't really many people that I know. It's the least extensive. It's not extensive. The Trump campaign was basically a one-man show. Not entirely, of course. It was done without almost any of the traditional tools of national politics. And so the recourse that the administration has is going to be a bit of a scramble. Nevertheless, with the Republican Party, even those who adamantly refuse to, and very few politicians actually came out, Republican politicians at least came out and said, we don't like Trump, we don't want to have anything to do with it. A lot of the political commentators have said that, certainly the more conservative types. There are quite a few out there who, that whole never Trump movement. The politicians, being far more practical people, will almost immediately aid, cooperate, and advise the incoming administration. So there is an enormous reservoir of skilled, bright, committed talent available for the Trump administration. And one of the most important things to look for in all of the impact on the market and the markets from here is the stability, or let's put it this way, the gravitas of the people who begin to be associated in public with the incoming administration. The continuity of American political structures, despite the enormous shock of this election, is reaffirmed. Mrs. Clinton gave a concession speech today. Last I saw, the popular vote was a trifle ahead for Mr. Trump. But there is no question that Mr. Trump won the election. I did not hear the concession speech, so maybe Mrs. Clinton said something else. I will listen to it when I leave. But I'm not expecting, at any rate, any sort of challenge to the election. But that's a long way from staffing the administration. The more moderate, centrist, experienced, quality people, and they are out there, and they're all going to be knocking on Mr. Clinton's door. I mean, Mr. Trump's door. Many of them will. The more of these that are incorporated into the plans and the positions of the incoming administration, this is where you have to focus as far as predicting how this is likely to play out. The markets have essentially given their verdict. Let's take a look again. The verdict of the markets, instantly delivered, astonishingly delivered. Yep, wrong one. Yep, that's also the wrong one. Here's the right one. When you are looking, I'm planning to write two pieces today. One on the market, the likely market results, and with a view forward, but also the astonishingly rapid change of heart that the market has had here. It's astonishing. Look at the low. The low yesterday was almost 1,000 points during the overnight on the E-mini, below where it is now, 800 points below where it is now. So the markets have rendered their judgment astonishingly fast. What they will do now, their judgment is on the election of Donald Trump, Donald J. Trump. I don't know what his middle name is. Maybe it's Joseph. That's the judgment that you're being elected. This is not a judgment going forward as to how and why and what they will do. Is it possible that this all devolves into chaos? I suppose it is. I don't expect that. Is it possible that the market will reverse its judgment in the days and weeks ahead? Absolutely. This judgment is simple. This involves the dollar as well. And it's also the reason why the Aussie and the Kiwi and the Aussie yen are down, although they've come back considerably from what they were last night. The judgment is one, the election of Donald Trump is no big deal. That's the market judgment. Look at it. It's there. One must accept it if you're believing in what the market says. That is not a judgment on what's happening in the forward. The other thing that is important here, and this is important for the currencies as well, is that the trade issues, particularly with China, but in general, are likely to become more pronounced. Those are the only two conclusions you can draw at the moment from the market reaction. Well, I guess the first one is the election is no big deal. Once you get over the shock, leave aside the political issues from the purely market point of view. What is the line from Shakespeare? Sound and fury signifying nothing. That's the definition of the election. So when you, and there's going to be, we're all going to go out there. I'm going to relax for a little bit when I go out there before I write my stuff today. We're all going to go out and read all sorts of comment. Anything that, and this is actually my opinion on you, and it extends beyond the markets. Avoid the hysterics. They're not true. avoid particularly the cultural hysterics. As I was telling someone this morning, Mr. Trump's comments over the election and before that are not of a genteel era. But then again, we do not live in a public genteel era. There are almost no public standards as far as expression in today's public culture. And when I say public culture, I mean throughout the media, everything you see depicted. Mr. Trump, whatever else you want to say, took brilliant advantage of that. Nobody else saw the possibilities of what he did. And I don't know how this came about. I do not know Mr. Trump, although we both live in Manhattan. He lives in Trump Tower and I live on the Upper West Side. So when you read and think about trading, about the markets going forward, try to keep the focus on the likely outcomes of policy changes in an incoming Trump administration. Do not get sidelined in all of the caterwauling that you're going to hear of comments politically or culturally based. Yes, it is true. This particular election has been a disaster for the Democrats. This is true. But political disasters are what happens in democracies. After the Second World War, the British turned around and defeated Winston Churchill, who essentially saved the Western world. And they threw him out of office. They were tired of wartime rationing. They were tired of everything that went with it. They later reelected him in 1950 when he was about 80 for a couple of years. So these types of things, lose not your perspective. These are the types of things not only that happen, but are supposed to happen in democracies. For the markets, they have already told you, as I said, their judgment. And with the exception of trade policy, of which markets are justifiably wary of what might, at least the rhetoric that might come out of a Trump administration, the reactions and the judgments of the markets are astonishingly positive. And at the moment are nothing to worry about. Okay, folks, that's kind of it for today. I hope it's been useful. I hope I have allayed some of the fear and trepidation that I know is out there. I have heard it from many friends of mine in many places around the world. And I will end on a quote, which I've used a number of times, a very famous quote. It's again Churchill, probably my favorite political leader, and many, many others. I'm hardly unique in that. And that is that democracy is the worst of all systems except for all others. And that is true today as it was when he said it. And let's hope that it will remain true for a very long time. Okay, I thank everyone for attending. I hope this has been useful. We'll see you on Monday. And there'll probably be a further elaboration of some of the themes and topics that we have discussed today. Thank you all very much for attending. Everybody have a great day.